The biting wind from the North Atlantic pounded against the hull of the USS Constellation on that morning of October 17, 1944. The dark, icy waters stretched as far as the eye could see, carrying with them the secrets of a war that still consumed the world. Among the men on board, one stood out for his experience and courage. 26-year-old Navy diver James Edward Harrison, a native of Portland, Maine. Harrison was no ordinary diver. A veteran of dozens of submarine operations, he had volunteered for the most dangerous missions of World War II. His superiors described him as meticulous, courageous, and tireless. On that particular day, his mission was to investigate the wreckage of a German submarine that had been sunk 3 weeks earlier. The enemy vessel carried, according to naval intelligence, classified documents that could change the course of the war in the European theater. Official records of the operation, archived for decades in the vaults of the U.S. Navy, revealed disturbing details about that fateful morning. The mission commander, Captain Robert Mitchell, noted in his diary that Harrison seemed restless before the dive. The diver had mentioned strange dreams the previous nights, visions of dark waters, and voices calling to him from the depths. Mitchell, a pragmatic and experienced man, attributed these demonstrations to the stress of war. Harrison's equipment that day was the most advanced available for the time, a Mark V diving suit with a bronze helmet and a pressurized air system connected to the surface by a hose. His belt carried special tools, including an experimental underwater camera and cutting devices for navigating the wreckage. Every piece of equipment had been carefully inspected and approved by the vessel's technicians. The plan was simple: descend to the wreckage of the German submarine, locate the documents, and return to the surface. At 8:32 a.m., Harrison began his descent to the bottom of the ocean. The sea was relatively calm, with waves only half a meter high. The conditions were ideal for the operation. For the first 15 minutes, the diver maintained regular contact with the surface via the cable communication system. His voice, recorded by the equipment of the time, sounded confident and professional. He reported its progressive descent, describing the gradual shift from sunlight to the absolute darkness of the deep. But then, 23 minutes into the dive, something extraordinary and terrifying happened that would forever change the history of this naval operation. James Harrison's last broadcast at 8:55 that morning still echoes in the U.S. Navy archives as one of the most disturbing records of World War II. His voice, initially calm and professional, changed its tone dramatically. Communications operators aboard the USS Constellation reported that Harrison began to whisper, as if trying to prevent something or anyone from hearing him. "There's something wrong down here," were his exact words, recorded in the official log of the operation. "This is not the submarine we were looking for." Captain Mitchell, who followed every word through the bridge loudspeakers, immediately ordered Harrison to describe what he was seeing. The diver's response chilled the blood of everyone present. Harrison reported that he had found not one, but 3 vessels on the ocean floor. The wreckage was arranged in triangular formation, as if it had sunk simultaneously during some kind of undocumented naval battle. More intriguing still, one of the vessels did not appear to be of German or American origin. The technical records of the mission, preserved in the National Archives, show that the communication equipment worked perfectly up to that time. Harrison went on to describe impossible scenes: metal structures that appeared to have been welded with unknown technology, symbols engraved on hulls that did not correspond to any known navy, and compartments that remained hermetically sealed despite decades on the seabed. The diver mentioned a strange sensation, as if he was being watched by the vessels themselves. Then, at 9 hours and 7 minutes, communication was abruptly interrupted. There was no scream, explosion, or emergency signal, simply absolute silence. Operators tried to re-establish contact for more than an hour, adjusting frequencies and testing equipment. The air hose continued to function normally, pumping oxygen into the depths, but there was no response from Harrison. Captain Mitchell made the most difficult decision of his career. He ordered the hose to be pulled back to the surface. What emerged from the icy waters of the North Atlantic that day haunted the crew of the USS Constellation. The air hose was intact, but completely empty. There was no sign of the diving suit, the bronze helmet, the tools, or James Harrison. It was as if he had simply disappeared, leaving behind only the lifeline that connected him to the surface. Rescue divers sent immediately after the incident reported extremely poor visibility conditions on the ocean floor, but were able to locate only scattered wreckage that did not match any vessel known to naval intelligence. Harrison had simply faded into the depths, taking with him all the equipment and, more importantly, the answers about what he really found down there. The official investigation into the disappearance of James Harrison began 48 hours after the incident, led by Rear Admiral William Thompson, one of the most respected officers in the U.S. Navy. Thompson had overseen dozens of submarine operations during the war and had never faced such a baffling case. The first documents of his investigation, declassified only in 1995, revealed the depth of the mystery surrounding the disappearance. Thompson's preliminary report documents interviews with all 23 crew members of the USS Constellation who were on duty that day. Each testimony was meticulously recorded, creating a detailed panorama of the events leading up to the disappearance. Marine Sergeant David Walsh, in charge of the diving equipment, swore that he had personally inspected each piece of Harrison's equipment the morning before. Everything was in perfect working order. Communications technician Robert Chen confirmed that there was no failure in the radio systems during the entire operation. More intriguing still was Captain Mitchell's testimony about Harrison's behavior in the days before the dive. According to personal documents found in the diver's lodge, Harrison had been writing frequent letters to his fiancée, Sarah Coleman, in Portland. These letters, preserved by the Coleman family for decades, contain disturbing references to recurring dreams about deep water and underwater voices. In a letter dated October 12th, 5 days before the disappearance, Harrison wrote, "Dear Sarah, I have had the strangest dreams. I see lights in the depths of the ocean, as if something ancient is trying to communicate with me." Rear Admiral Thompson ordered an extensive search of the area of the disappearance. 3 naval vessels and a team of 12 experienced divers scoured the ocean floor for an entire week. The results of the search, documented in detailed technical reports, were both frustrating and hauntingly mysterious. The divers found evidence of a naval battle that was not in any official records. Hulls pierced by unknown projectiles, debris strewn in patterns that suggested a coordinated explosion, and even more disturbing, pieces of metal with a chemical composition that did not match any alloy known to metallurgy at the time. Dr. Marcus Webb, a naval metallurgist called in to analyze the recovered fragments, was baffled by his findings. Its technical reports, filed in the Navy laboratories, describe a metallic alloy with properties impossible for the technology of 1944. The metal exhibited corrosion resistance that surpassed any known material, and its molecular structure suggested manufacturing processes that would not be developed by mankind for decades. Webb concluded his report with an observation that would haunt investigators. This material should not exist in our technological timeline. Meanwhile, in the depths of the North Atlantic, something was patiently awaiting its discovery, 70 years in the future. Sarah Coleman never fully recovered from her fiancé's disappearance. After receiving the official notification from the Navy on October 25, 1944, she meticulously guarded all of Harrison's letters, along with photographs, personal documents, and a small wooden box he had given her before leaving for his last mission. For decades, Sarah maintained regular correspondence with other family members of missing military personnel. forming an informal network of people who refused to accept official explanations about the fate of their loved ones. Harrison's letters to Sarah, preserved in perfect condition, reveal a disturbing progression of events in the months before her disappearance. By August 1944, his correspondence was normal, full of plans for marriage and routine descriptions of military life. However, from September onwards, the tone changed drastically. Harrison began to mention recurring dreams, where he walked along the ocean floor without scuba gear, breathing normally under the water. He described encounters with shadowy figures who seemed to be trying to show him something important in the deep sea. One particularly unsettling letter, dated Oct. 2, contains a detailed drawing by Harrison's own hand. The drawing shows 3 vessels arranged in triangular formation on the seafloor, exactly as he would describe during his last radio communication. Even more strikingly, the drawing includes symbols and markings that Harrison claimed to have seen in his dreams, symbols that would later be found engraved on the wreckage recovered by the search team. Sarah kept this drawing as a relic, unaware that it would become a crucial piece of the puzzle decades later. Rear Admiral Thompson, intrigued by Harrison's letters, decided to expand his investigation beyond the technical aspects of the disappearance. He ordered a thorough psychological analysis of Harrison's medical records, conducted by naval psychiatrist Dr. Henry Morrison. Dr. Morrison, a specialist in war trauma, was fascinated by the case. His medical files reveal that Harrison had undergone a battery of psychological tests 3 weeks before the disappearance, all with completely normal results. There were no signs of post-traumatic stress, hallucinations, or any mental disorder that could explain her premonitory dreams. Even more disturbing was the fact that other divers in the naval fleet had begun to report similar dreams after Harrison's disappearance. Sergeant Michael Torres, a veteran of 15 submarine missions, sought out Dr. Morrison in November of 1944, reporting night visions identical to those described in Harrison's letters. Torres described underwater walks, encounters with mysterious presences, and a constant sense of being called to the depths of the ocean. 6 other divers from the same naval unit reported similar experiences over the next few months, creating a pattern that left researchers completely baffled. It was as if something deep in the North Atlantic was trying to make contact with the U.S. Navy divers, using Harrison as some kind of bridge between 2 worlds. But the full truth about this phenomenon would not be revealed until 7 decades later, when an extraordinary discovery would change everything we knew about that mysterious disappearance. The Harrison case file was officially closed in March 1945, classified as disappearance in action, undetermined circumstances. Rear Admiral Thompson, despite his personal misgivings, had no choice but to shelve the investigation due to the pressures of the end of the war. However, Thompson never completely abandoned the case. His personal files, discovered after his death in 1978, reveal that he continued to investigate Harrison's disappearance for more than 3 decades, collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses in his spare time. Among Thompson's personal papers was extensive correspondence with ocean researchers, marine archaeologists, and even investigators of anomalous phenomena. One particularly intriguing letter, dated 1952, was sent by Naval Dr. Edmund Hayes, an expert in underwater acoustics who had analyzed the recordings of Harrison's last communication. Dr. Hayes reported discovering unusual sound frequencies in the recordings, sounds that were not perceptible to the human ear, but that appeared clearly when the tapes were analyzed with specialized equipment. Dr. Hayes's findings were astonishingly specific. The frequencies found in the recordings followed complex mathematical patterns, almost as if they were some kind of code or language. Even more disturbing, these same frequencies had been detected in other recordings of naval dives conducted in the same region in the years following Harrison's disappearance. Hayes concluded that there was some kind of active sound source at the bottom of the North Atlantic, emitting signals consistently and apparently intelligently. His theory, considered radical at the time, suggested that Harrison had found something he was trying to communicate. Sarah Coleman, meanwhile, had become something of an amateur detective, dedicating her life to uncovering the truth about her fiancé's disappearance. In 1955, she arranged a meeting in Portland with family members of other divers missing under similar circumstances during World War II. What they found was surprising. There were at least 8 documented cases of naval divers who had disappeared in deep water between 1942 and 1945, all reporting similar premonitory dreams before their last dives. The Portland meeting resulted in the creation of the Deep Water Project, an informal investigation conducted by the families of the missing. Sarah Coleman led the group, which included Margaret Torres, sister of Sergeant Michael Torres, and David Morrison Jr., son of psychiatrist Dr. Henry Morrison. Through regular correspondence and meetings, they began to map geographical and temporal patterns in the disappearances. His findings, documented in hundreds of letters and typewritten reports, revealed that all of the disappearances had occurred in a specific area of the North Atlantic, within a 50 nautical mile radius of the place where Harrison had disappeared. More intriguing still, witnesses reported sightings of unidentified underwater lights in the region during the same times as the disappearances. It was as if something ancient and mysterious was awakening in the depths of the ocean, carefully choosing those who would be called upon to make contact. But the true nature of this phenomenon would remain hidden for another 60 years, until an oceanic exploration expedition would make the most extraordinary discovery in modern maritime history. 70 years after the disappearance of James Harrison, in September of 2014, the ocean expedition Deep Atlantic Explorer set sail from Boston with a seemingly routine mission to map World War II shipwrecks for a historical documentary. The team was led by marine archaeologist Dr. Catherine Reed, an expert on military shipwrecks, and included some of the most experienced underwater explorers in the United States. No one on the expedition had heard of James Harrison or the mysterious disappearances of divers during the war. They were simply following coordinates provided by declassified naval records. The research ship Atlantic Pioneer was equipped with state-of-the-art technology. High-resolution sonar, unmanned underwater vehicles, and camera systems capable of operating at depths of more than 3,000 meters. Dr. Reed had chosen that particular area of the North Atlantic because historical records indicated the presence of several unexplored wartime shipwrecks. What she didn't know was that she was sailing over the exact spot where Harrison had disappeared 7 decades earlier. During the first 3 days of exploration, the team located several expected wrecks, remains of merchant ships, aircraft wrecks, and fragments of military vessels. However, on the morning of September 22nd, the sonar detected something extraordinary. At a depth of 2,800 meters, there was a wreck formation that did not correspond to any known naval record. 3 large craft were arranged in perfect triangular formation, just as Harrison had described in his last radio communication. Dr. Reed ordered the dispatch of the underwater vehicle Deep Eye for further investigation. The first images transmitted to the surface left the entire team perplexed. The wreck was in a state of preservation impossible for vessels that had supposedly spent 70 years on the ocean floor. Metal structures glowed as if they had been freshly polished. Compartments remained hermetically sealed, and most intriguingly, there was evidence of recent activity around the wreckage. Marks on the sand on the seafloor that suggested movement, as if something or someone had been working in the area. The most shocking moment of the exploration came when the Deep Eye discovered a partially open compartment on one of the vessels. Inside the compartment, perfectly preserved as if it had been placed there the day before, was a bronze Mark V diving helmet, along with naval tools and equipment that clearly dated from the 1940s. Dr. Reed, an expert in marine archaeology, had never seen artifacts in such a state of preservation. It was as if time had simply stopped at that particular spot on the ocean floor. But the most extraordinary discovery was yet to come, when the underwater vehicle focused on a nameplate engraved on the bronze helmet. The letters, perfectly legible despite 7 decades submerged, formed a name that would change everything. J.E. Harrison, U.S. Navy, 1944. The search for a diver lost 70 years ago was finally over, but the real investigation was just beginning. The discovery of James Harrison's helmet set off a series of events that would turn a simple archaeological expedition into one of the most complex investigations in modern maritime history. Dr. Catherine Reed immediately suspended all other research activities and focused all the resources of the expedition on the analysis of the wreckage. She contacted marine conservation experts, naval historians, and, most importantly, began a search of the U.S. Navy archives to verify the authenticity of the find. Professor Dr. Maritime Historian Daniel Foster from Harvard University was called to consult the expedition via satellite communication. Foster was recognized worldwide as an expert on World War II naval operations and maintained a vast collection of declassified records on submarine missions. When Reed described the discovery of the helmet with the identification J.E. Harrison, Foster immediately recognized the name. He had found references to the missing diver during his research on classified naval operations of the time. Foster revealed to the expedition team that he possessed copies of documents related to the Harrison case, including reports of the investigation conducted by Rear Admiral Thompson. More impressively, he had recently located Thompson's personal archives at an auction of military antiquities. Among these files were Harrison's letters to Sarah Coleman, including the prophetic drawing of the 3 vessels in triangular formation. The correlation between Harrison's drawing and the actual formation discovered at the bottom of the ocean was perfect down to the smallest detail. Dr. Reed ordered a more intensive exploration of the wreck using state-of-the-art equipment to create a complete 3-dimensional mapping of the area. The results were surprising and disturbing at the same time. Not only were the 3 hulls arranged in triangular formation, but they were also connected by a series of metal cables and structures that had clearly been installed after the sinking. It was as if someone had turned the wreck into some kind of functional underwater complex. Even more intriguing was the discovery of compartments that had been modified with technology that did not exist in 1944. Water filtration systems, power generators that were still functioning after 7 decades, and more disturbing, evidence of recent human habitation. In one of the compartments, the Deep Eye vehicle discovered clothing, personal items and diving equipment that appeared to have been used recently. There were also handwritten notes in notebooks that remained surprisingly legible despite the humidity. The notes were written in the same handwriting found in Harrison's letters to Sarah Coleman. It was as if the missing diver had continued to live and work on the ocean floor for all these decades, adapting the wreck for his survival needs. But if Harrison had really survived for 70 years in the depths of the North Atlantic, where was he now? And more importantly, what had he discovered down there that had kept him away from the surface for so long? The notes found in the wreckage proved to be the most disturbing element of the entire investigation. Dr. Reed ordered them to be photographed page by page and sent for handwriting analysis. Forensic calligraphy expert Dr. Richard Matthews confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the writing belonged to James Harrison. Even more astonishingly, the notes were progressively dated, beginning in October of 1944 and extending until July of 2014, just 2 months before the discovery by the expedition. The contents of Harrison's notebooks defied all known scientific logic. In the first entries, dated October of 1944, Harrison described his discovery of the wreck and his decision to remain at the bottom of the ocean to investigate what he had found. He reported that he had discovered that the three vessels were not of land origin, but rather some kind of advanced technology that had taken on the appearance of military ships to camouflage themselves. According to his notes, these vessels were actually some kind of underwater research station of unknown origin. Harrison described in detail how he had learned to operate life support systems within the wreckage, allowing him to breathe and survive in the ocean depths. His notes mentioned guardians, entities he never physically described, but who appeared to be responsible for the maintenance of the underwater station. These keepers, Harrison said, had been waiting for someone with his diving skills to help with some sort of long-term project related to monitoring the Earth's oceans. The most recent entries in the notebooks, dated 233 and 2144, revealed that Harrison had aged extremely slowly during his 7 decades at the bottom of the sea. He estimated himself to have the physical appearance of someone in his mid-40s, despite chronologically being over 90. Harrison attributed this to the advanced technology present in the wreck, which had altered his metabolism and aging processes. His notes indicated that he had become a kind of human guardian of the station, responsible for monitoring ocean activity and reporting his findings to the facility's original mysterious occupants. The most shocking discovery came in the last entry in the notebook, dated July 15, 2014. Harrison had detected the approach of the Deep Atlantic Explorer expedition weeks before its arrival. His final note read, "They have finally arrived. 70 years of waiting have come to an end. It's time to return to the surface and share what I've learned about the true inhabitants of this planet. Sarah, my love, if you are still alive when you read this, know that I have never stopped thinking about you. What I discovered below will change everything humanity thinks about its origin and destiny. I'll be waiting on the surface when you return." Dr. Reed reread the message several times, trying to process its implications. If the notes were authentic, James Harrison might still be alive somewhere, waiting to make contact with the world he had left behind 70 years ago. But where exactly would he be waiting? And what extraordinary knowledge did he carry with him after decades of living in the depths of the ocean? Dr. Reed made a decision that would change her career forever, to immediately cancel the expedition and return to Boston to process the extraordinary discoveries. However, on the morning of September 26, 2014, before the Atlantic Pioneer could begin its return journey, sonar instruments detected significant movement in the depths. Something was rising from the wreckage toward the surface, moving at a constant, controlled speed that clearly indicated intentional action. The crew gathered on the main deck, all eyes fixed on the dark waters of the North Atlantic. The same oceans that had swallowed James Harrison 70 years earlier seemed poised to return something back to the surface world. Marine biologist Stephen Cole, a member of the expedition, monitored the instruments while reporting data in real time. Unique object about the size of a human, rising in a controlled manner. Consistent speed, with no signs of floating or drifting. Whatever it is, it's intentionally rising. At 10 o'clock 42 minutes in the morning, a figure emerged from the icy waters, approximately 50 yards from the ship. It was a man wearing a wetsuit that appeared to be an impossible combination of 1944 technology with modifications that defied comprehension. The helmet was clearly of American naval origin, but it was connected to life support systems that glowed with a soft, steady light. The figure swam toward the ship with confident and precise movements, like someone completely familiar with ocean waters. When the man was hoisted aboard the Atlantic Pioneer, Dr. Reed came face to face with James Edward Harrison. Although chronologically over 90 years old, Harrison appeared to be at most 45, just as he had described in his notes. His blue eyes retained the same intensity seen in the photographs of 1944, but they now carried a depth of knowledge that suggested decades of extraordinary experiences. His first word after 70 years of silence was a name: Sarah. Harrison was immediately taken to the ship's infirmary, where he underwent preliminary medical examinations that completely confused Dr. Cole. His vital signs were perfectly normal, but there was something indefinably different about his physiology. His body temperature was slightly lower than normal human. His blood pressure remained constant regardless of physical stress, and most intriguingly, his blood cells had a molecular structure that Dr. Cole had never seen in humans. It was as if Harrison had become something between human and something more adapted to ocean life. During his first interview with Dr. Reed, Harrison spoke calmly about his 7 decades at the bottom of the sea, describing discoveries that would challenge humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. He revealed that Earth's oceans were much more than simple bodies of water, but rather an intergalactic communication network monitored for millennia by advanced civilizations who considered Earth a crucial observation point. But Harrison kept an even more extraordinary secret, something he had discovered only in the last weeks of his sojourn underwater, something that would explain why he had chosen that particular moment to return to the surface. During the 3-day return trip to Boston, Harrison shared with Dr. Reed revelations that would redefine humanity's understanding of its own history. Sitting in the ship's cabin, with the ocean stretching infinitely through the windows, Harrison explained that the entities he called guardians were representatives of an aquatic civilization that had arrived on Earth long before the emergence of humanity. These beings had established monitoring stations in the deepest oceans, observing the evolution of terrestrial life over millions of years. Harrison revealed that his original mission in 1944 had not been an accident. The Guardians had been subtly influencing naval events during World War II by guiding specific divers to their underwater stations. They were looking for humans with particular characteristics: exceptional courage, physical adaptability, and most importantly, a natural connection to aquatic environments. Harrison had been chosen from hundreds of military divers because of his unique combination of these qualities. During his 7 decades at the bottom of the ocean, Harrison had served as a bridge between humanity and the Guardians, helping them better understand the psychology and social development of human beings. In return, he had learned about technologies that allowed him prolonged survival in the depths and had gained knowledge about the true history of planet Earth. The Guardians showed him evidence that humanity was not the first intelligent civilization to develop on Earth, and that the oceans preserved records of lost cultures that had existed millions of years before the emergence of Homo sapiens. The reason Harrison had chosen to return to the surface in 2014 was related to an alarming discovery he had made in the last months of his undersea sojourn. The Guardians had detected significant changes in the chemical composition of Earth's oceans, changes that suggested that the planet was entering a transitional phase that could drastically affect life as we know it. The changes were not only caused by human activity, but also by natural cycles that occurred every 200,000 Earth years. Harrison explained that the Guardians had made the decision to establish official contact with humanity for the first time in history, and he had been chosen to serve as an ambassador at this first meeting. His unique experience as a human being who had lived between both worlds made him the perfect bridge to facilitate communication between the two species. He carried with him not only advanced technological knowledge, but also proposals for cooperation that could help humanity navigate the planetary changes that were to come. But Harrison also carried an urgent warning. Humanity would have only a few years to prepare for transformations that would fundamentally alter life on Earth. The Guardians were willing to help, but only if humanity demonstrated that it was ready to accept its true position in the universe as a young species on a planet shared with much older and more advanced civilizations. The fate of humanity would depend on how it responds to this extraordinary revelation. James Harrison's return to Boston on September 29, 2014, set off a series of events that remained classified by the highest levels of the American government for years. Dr. Reed, following national security protocols, immediately contacted federal authorities even before the ship docked in port. Within 2 hours, agents from multiple government agencies had taken control of the situation, transferring Harrison to an undisclosed military facility and confiscating all records of the expedition. Harrison, however, had anticipated this reaction. During the return trip, he had shared with Dr. Reed information that she could use to independently verify his claims. It provided exact coordinates of the Guardian's other underwater stations scattered across the world's oceans, along with specific frequencies of communication that could be used to establish contact. Most importantly, Harrison had handed Reed a small crystalline device that the Guardians had given him as proof of his extraordinary history. The device, no larger than a coin, emitted a soft, steady light that could not be explained by any known technology. When connected to electronic equipment, it dramatically increased its energy efficiency and allowed communications over impossible distances without any external power source. Dr. Cole, who had been able to analyze the device briefly before the government confiscation, described its properties as completely revolutionary for our understanding of physics. While Harrison was being interrogated by government experts, Dr. Reed made a life-changing decision. She secretly contacted Professor Daniel Foster at Harvard, sharing with him the coordinates provided by Harrison. Foster, intrigued by the possibilities, quietly organized a second expedition using academic resources and private funding. This expedition, conducted in complete secrecy, would depart 3 months later to verify Harrison's claims about other underwater stations. Parallel to these events, something extraordinary was happening to Sarah Coleman. Now 92 years old and living in a nursing home in Portland, Sarah had begun to have vivid dreams about James in the evenings following his return. These were not ordinary dreams of an elderly person recalling the past, but detailed and specific visions of events that he could not have known. Sarah dreamed of the underwater stations, the Guardians, and the specific messages James wanted to convey to her. Sarah's granddaughter, Jennifer Coleman Wright, a nurse who specializes in geriatric care, initially attributed these dreams to the natural cognitive decline of old age. But when Sarah began drawing detailed maps of the underwater stations and writing on symbols she claimed to have learned from James in his dreams, Jennifer became deeply concerned. Sarah's drawings were incredibly detailed and technical, far beyond anything a person with no training in marine engineering could conceive. Jennifer decided to research the history of her grandmother's engagement and discovered, to her surprise, that there was an informal network of descendants of military personnel who disappeared during World War II who still maintained occasional contact. Through this network, she was able to locate Margaret Torres, now 86 years old, sister of Sergeant Michael Torres, who had disappeared under similar circumstances to Harrison. Margaret reported that she had also been having strange dreams recently, dreams in which her brother showed her underwater places and relayed messages about important changes that were coming. The most surprising discovery came when Jennifer compared her grandmother's drawings with those of Margaret Torres. The symbols, architectural structures, and even number sequences were identical, despite the two women not having had contact for more than 20 years. It was as if James Harrison and Michael Torres were utilizing some kind of telepathic communication to transmit simultaneous information to their families on the surface. Jennifer meticulously documented these impossible coincidences, unaware that her findings would soon become crucial in substantiating the extraordinary claims Harrison had made to government authorities. Meanwhile, at the military facilities where Harrison was being held, government interrogators faced an unprecedented dilemma. All scientific tests confirmed that Harrison was telling the truth about his age, his underwater experience, and his physiological changes. Even more disturbing, the coordinates he had provided were being verified by military submarines, which confirmed the presence of anomalous structures at the exact locations specified by Harrison. The U.S. government was faced with a situation that defied all established protocols. How to deal with the discovery that humanity was not alone on planet Earth and that other intelligent civilizations had been quietly observing and influencing human development for millennia. Professor Foster's second expedition set sail discreetly from a private port in Massachusetts in January of 2015, 4 months after Harrison's return. The team was small but highly skilled. In addition to Foster, it included Dr. Reed, who had resigned from her official position to participate in the independent investigation, 2 experienced technical divers, and an underwater communications specialist. They utilized a private research vessel, the Deep Quest, equipped with advanced sonar technology and remote underwater vehicles. The first coordinates provided by Harrison took them to an area of the Atlantic about 200 miles east of Cape Cod. What they found there completely validated the claims of the missing diver. At a depth of 3,200 meters, a massive crystalline structure stretched across the ocean floor like an underwater city. The structure emitted a soft, pulsating light, clearly artificial, and was covered in symbols identical to those Sarah Coleman had been drawing in her dreams. Dr. Reed personally directed one of the dives using a state-of-the-art submersible. What she found challenged her scientific understanding. Perfectly preserved corridors filled with water, but allowing normal breathing, rooms with working technology that appeared to be thousands of years old, and most surprisingly, clear evidence of habitation by humanoid beings who were not fully human. There were clothes, utensils, and equipment sized for people slightly larger than typical humans, with hands that had 6 fingers instead of 5. During the exploration, Reed discovered a room that had clearly been occupied by James Harrison during his decades underwater. There were familiar personal effects, his family Bible, photographs of Sarah Coleman that had been laminated to withstand water, and additional notebooks filled with English notes mixed with symbols he had learned from the Guardians. One particularly touching discovery was a never-sent letter to Sarah, dated December 2013, in which Harrison expressed his grief at having lost a whole life with her and his hope that she could forgive him for his long absence. As Foster analyzed the expedition's finds, extraordinary events continued to unfold on the surface. Jennifer Coleman Wright had expanded her investigation into her grandmother's dreams and discovered a disturbing pattern. Descendants of military personnel missing in naval operations between 1942 and 1945 were reporting similar experiences across the country. She had located families in California, Florida, Texas, and Washington, all reporting that their elderly relatives were having vivid dreams about relatives missing for decades, relaying complex technical information. Jennifer organized an unofficial national conference of these family members in Chicago in March of 2015. 27 families attended, representing 31 servicemen who had gone missing during naval operations of World War II. What they discovered during this encounter was astounding. All of the disappearances had occurred in a specific range of ocean latitudes. All of the military personnel had reported premonitory dreams before their last missions. And most importantly, they all seemed to be conveying the same basic message through the dreams of their family members. Humanity needed to prepare for fundamental changes that would occur in the coming years. The most consistent message across all the families was that the Earth's oceans were undergoing a transformation that would drastically affect the global climate, sea current patterns, and marine life. The missing servicemen, now serving as observers at the Guardian's underwater stations, were transmitting specific scientific data about these changes via telepathic communication with their loved ones. It was as if they had become an early warning network, trying to prepare humanity for unprecedented environmental challenges. The most dramatic confirmation of the authenticity of these communications came when Jennifer compared the technical information transmitted through dreams with official oceanographic data that was not available to the public. Predictions about changes in ocean temperatures, changes in currents, and variations in salinity levels corresponded exactly to classified data that only experts in military oceanography would have access to. It was impossible for civilian family members to have invented such precise and technical information. The inevitable reality was becoming clear. James Harrison and dozens of other missing servicemen had not died, but rather had been recruited for a decades-long mission to monitor and protect planet Earth, serving as human ambassadors to a much older and more advanced civilization that shared our world. In April 2150, 6 months after Harrison's return, events began to accelerate in ways that no government or scientific organization was prepared to handle. The findings of the Chicago Conference had been quietly shared with independent researchers around the world, creating an informal international network of researchers working outside official channels. This network included oceanographers, military historians, psychologists specializing in paranormal phenomena, and, most importantly, family members of military personnel missing in multi-nation naval operations. Dr. Elena Kozlov, a Russian oceanographer at Moscow University, had been monitoring anomalies in Arctic waters that exactly matched the predictions conveyed through the dreams documented by Jennifer Coleman Wright. Kozlov secretly contacted Foster through academic channels, revealing that declassified Soviet archives contained records of at least 15 Red Navy submariners who had disappeared under Harrison-like circumstances between 1943 and 1946. More surprisingly, families of these submariners in Russia were also reporting recent dreams with technical messages about ocean change. Professor Dr. Heinrich Müller, a German naval historian, contributed even more disturbing discoveries. German Kriegsmarine files, kept secret for decades, documented underwater operations that had resulted in the disappearance of specialized deep-sea divers. These files included reports of sightings of anomalous underwater lights and unidentified structures on the bottom of European oceans. Müller had located German families who also reported recent dream communications, suggesting that the phenomenon transcended nationalities and had reached military personnel from all combatant forces during World War II. While this international network of researchers compiled evidence, James Harrison remained at an American military installation, participating in daily debriefing sessions with experts from multiple government agencies. Records of these sessions, later leaked by whistleblowers years later, reveal that Harrison had provided technical information that allowed the US government to develop revolutionary energy technologies based on Guardian principles. But Harrison had insisted on one condition: these technologies would only be shared with humanity if the world's governments agreed to work together to address the impending planetary changes. Harrison's condition created an unprecedented geopolitical dilemma. The technologies it offered could permanently solve clean energy issues, ocean water desalination on a global scale, and even instantaneous communication over long distances without the need for satellites. But implementing these solutions would require a level of international cooperation that has never existed in human history. Harrison explained that the Guardians had observed civilizations on other planets fail precisely due to the inability to overcome political divisions in the face of planetary crises. During this period of secret negotiations between governments, Sarah Coleman was undergoing an extraordinary transformation. Her dreams had evolved from simple communications with James to full-fledged immersive experiences where she literally visited the Guardians' underwater stations. Jennifer documented that her grandmother began to speak fluently in languages she had never learned, languages that corresponded to the symbols found in underwater stations by Foster's expedition. Even more surprising, Sarah began to demonstrate advanced scientific knowledge about oceanography, quantum physics, and biotechnology that was far beyond her formal education. One day in May of 2015, Sarah calmly announced to Jennifer that James would come to visit her in person that evening. Jennifer, initially concerned about her grandmother's mental decline, was surprised when at 11 o'clock in the evening, James Harrison appeared in the garden of the nursing home. He wasn't wearing any special gear, just normal civilian clothes, but his presence emanated a tranquil energy that Jennifer described as otherworldly but comforting. Harrison had been allowed by the Guardians to make this visit as part of a final phase of preparation for what was to come. The meeting between James and Sarah after 70 years of separation was documented by Jennifer through secret recordings. The conversation, conducted partly in English and partly in the symbolic language of the Guardians that Sarah had learned through dreams, revealed specific details about the impending planetary changes. James explained that the Earth was entering a natural cycle that occurred approximately every 200,000 years. A period during which the planet's oceans underwent a fundamental reorganization of their currents and chemical composition. Harrison revealed that previous civilizations on Earth had faced similar cycles, but none had developed enough technology to survive the changes. Today's humanity was unique because it had developed advanced technological capabilities simultaneously with the onset of a new planetary cycle. The Guardians, who had survived multiple cycles through their adaptation to ocean environments, offered technical assistance to help humanity navigate this transition. However, they demanded a fundamental condition. Humanity should demonstrate the capacity for unification and cooperation on a global scale. James explained to Sarah that the next 18 months would be crucial in determining whether humanity was ready to receive help from the Guardians or whether it should face the planetary changes alone. He had returned not only as an ambassador but as a test. If the world's governments could overcome their differences to work together based on their revelations, the Guardians would officially emerge and establish open contact with humanity. If they failed, the Guardians would retreat to their deepest underwater cities and leave humanity to face a period of change that could last 1,000 years on its own. The farewell between James and Sarah was touching and final. He explained that this would be his last visit to the surface as a human. Regardless of humanity's decision, he would return to the depths to continue his work as guardian of the underwater stations. Sarah, demonstrating a serenity that surprised Jennifer, accepted this reality with grace, saying that she had had a complete life, knowing that James was alive and fulfilling a purpose greater than any individual love. She asked only that he always remember that she had waited for him and understood his choice to serve something greater than themselves. The next morning, James Harrison disappeared again, this time leaving behind only a crystalline device, similar to the one he had given Dr. Reed, along with coordinates of 17 additional underwater stations scattered across the world's oceans. The world was about to find out if humanity possessed the maturity necessary to accept its true position in the universe and work together to meet the challenges that would define the future of our species. The 18 months that followed James Harrison's last meeting with Sarah Coleman turned into the most extraordinary and challenging period in modern history. What began as the discovery of a missing diver evolved into a situation that would test the limits of human cooperation and redefine our understanding of our place in the universe. World governments, initially skeptical of Harrison's claims, were forced to confront irrefutable evidence when predicted ocean changes began to occur exactly as he had described. In September 2050, ocean temperatures at specific points in the North Atlantic began to fluctuate inexplicably, creating anomalous currents that affected global weather patterns. Simultaneously, seismic stations around the world detected underwater activity that followed the exact patterns transmitted through the dreams documented by the families of missing servicemen. The international scientific community, initially torn between skepticism and curiosity, began to accept that something extraordinary was actually happening in the Earth's oceans. Dr. Reid, now working openly with an international coalition of researchers, coordinated simultaneous expeditions to the 17 underwater stations whose coordinates Harrison had provided. What these expeditions discovered completely validated the revelations of the missing diver, a global network of underwater facilities inhabited by an advanced civilization that had been monitoring the Earth for millennia. Most importantly, each station contained at least one human who had disappeared during military operations over the past 8 decades. Jennifer Coleman Wright, who had become a central figure in documenting these phenomena, organized the first official international meeting between government representatives and family members of missing military personnel. This meeting, held in Geneva in December 2050, brought together delegations from 43 nations that had documented similar disappearances in their naval forces. The event marked the first official acknowledgement by world governments that humanity had established contact with a non-human civilization. During the Geneva conference, something extraordinary happened that changed the dynamics of the negotiations forever. Sarah Coleman, now 93, arrived accompanied by Jennifer and requested permission to address the assembly. Speaking with a clarity and authority that astonished everyone present, Sarah relayed a message she had received from James through her dream communications. The message was clear. The Guardians were willing to emerge from the ocean depths and establish official contact with humanity, but only under one fundamental condition. The condition was not technological or military, but profoundly human: the creation of a unified global council dedicated exclusively to the preservation of the Earth's oceans and to cooperation among all nations to face the impending planetary changes. The Guardians did not demand submission or acknowledgement of superiority, but rather a genuine demonstration that humanity had evolved beyond its tribal divisions to work as a unified species in the face of planetary challenges. The proposal has created intense debates among national delegations. Some countries saw the opportunity for access to advanced technologies as essential to their national security. Others feared that the global cooperation demanded by the Guardians would compromise their national sovereignty. But when scientific data confirmed that the ocean changes predicted by Harrison were accelerating beyond the most conservative projections, the urgency of the situation became undeniable. In March 2016, after months of complex negotiations, 38 nations signed the Geneva Agreement for Global Ocean Cooperation, establishing the first international council with real authority to implement policies that transcended national borders. The agreement not only created mechanisms for unprecedented scientific cooperation, but also established protocols for the first official contact between humanity and the Guardians. The contact took place on a clear morning in April 2016, when representatives of the Guardians simultaneously surfaced in waters near 7 coastal cities around the world. They were not the alien beings that science fiction had imagined, but rather an aquatic species that had evolved on Earth in parallel with humanity, developing oceanic civilizations while humans focused on terrestrial environments. Its appearance was humanoid, but adapted for aquatic life, slightly taller with elongated limbs, 6 fingers on each hand, and larger eyes adapted to low-light environments. The first official communique from the Guardians was broadcast simultaneously through all communication stations on the planet, translated into all known human languages. Their message was both welcoming and alert. They had been watching humanity for millennia, admiring our creativity and adaptability, but concerned about our tendency toward destructive conflict. The impending planetary changes would require cooperation between both species to preserve life on Earth as we know it. James Harrison appeared one last time during the first contact ceremonies, serving as the official translator between the two species. He had become something between human and guardian, retaining his essential identity, but acquiring capabilities that allowed him to serve as a bridge between two worlds. During his final public appearance, Harrison handed over to world authorities technologies for ocean purification, clean energy generation, and instant global communication, fulfilling the promise he had made decades earlier. Sarah Coleman passed away peacefully in June 1960, just 2 months after witnessing the first official contact between the two species. Her last words, recorded by Jennifer, were directed at James. "I kept my promise to wait for you. Now you can fulfill yours of caring for our world." Jennifer inherited not only her grandmother's letters and documents, but also the responsibility of continuing to document the evolution of the relationship between humans and guardians. Today, nearly a decade after first contact, the Guardian's underwater stations serve as joint research centers where scientists of both species work to understand and mitigate the effects of planetary change. James Harrison, now officially recognized as the first interspecies ambassador in history, continues his mission in the deep ocean, but makes regular appearances on the surface to consult on issues of global cooperation. The legacy of the diver who disappeared in 1944 transcended any military mission he could have imagined on that fateful morning in the North Atlantic. His courage to accept the unknown and his dedication to something greater than himself not only saved his own life, but also paved the way for a new era in human history. The ocean depths, which once posed mystery and danger, have become symbols of cooperation and hope for the future of our planet. The story of James Edward Harrison reminds us that sometimes the greatest disappearances are not losses, but transformations. That the courage to dive into the unknown can reveal world-changing truths, and that true love, like Sarah Coleman's, can transcend decades of separation and even the boundaries between species. In the deep waters of the North Atlantic where it all began, the lights of the underwater stations continue to shine, eternal symbols that even in the darkest and most unexplored places of our world, there can be hope, wisdom, and the promise of a better future for all life on Earth. If you were fascinated by this mysterious disappearance case that changed our understanding of who really inhabits our planet, you can't miss our upcoming investigations into other unexplained cases in modern history. Subscribe to the channel now and activate the notification bell to be the first to discover more extraordinary secrets that defy everything we thought we knew about our world.